Not least, Mr. Brindisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for being late, juggling a couple different committees today, but thank you for allowing me to be here, give me an opportunity to ask a few questions about our bill, H.R. 233, the Support for Suicide Prevention Coordinators Act. And I just want to ask just a couple brief questions because I think that coordinators are really the face of the VA's efforts to address the veteran suicide epidemic. And many are report being overworked or unable to keep up with some of their responsibilities. So essentially what this act would do is give our prevention coordinators the resources they need to be able to do an effective job, and specifically the bill would require the Comptroller General to conduct an assessment of the responsibilities, workload, and vacancy rates of the Department of Veterans Affairs suicide prevention coordinators and submit it to Congress within 1 year. So I know that the VA hasn't taken an official position on the bill, but I assume that you would welcome an outside assessment by the Comptroller General to conduct an assessment and report back to Congress.
Yes, and I also shared with the committee earlier that we have an assessment well underway where we're looking not only at just the role of the suicide prevention coordinators, but more broadly in the role of other capabilities that we might need to bring to the table as part of our new strategy. We're trying to work with veterans and get after suicide where they work, live, and thrive, which is outside of our four walls. The role of the SPCs has largely been focused on clinical work with very limited outreach events, 5 a month. And so we're not only looking at their role, but we have a study underway and an analysis where we're looking at other capabilities as well that might need to get brought to the table.
Can you talk a little bit about, because I represent a very rural district, some of the outreach efforts that are being done in more rural areas where you may not be close to a CBOC or a hospital where public transportation options are pretty poor. How do you conduct outreach in those areas?
Yeah, it's a difficult issue, just as you describe, and we try to tackle it through a multi-pronged approach, whether that's our SPCs, which that alone will not solve it because, as you describe, it's rural and they have to go long and far to get across the span. Using online technology helps, but again, alone will not solve it because not all of these areas have broadband and the width to do it. And then we have our mobile vet centers that will go out. I don't know if you've ever interacted with this capability, but it's actually like a vet center on wheels, if you will, and they'll go out to rural areas. We're trying to target when and where to place them, and we have a movement underway that allows for that to happen. So that's the third. And then the fourth is we're using partners. And so while we may not be able to outreach and get after this issue with every single person ourselves, we're trying to have our partners help serve as force multipliers and help us with this outreach as well. So when there are local entities and community-based folks that people that live in rural America know well and trust well, and they're equipped with the signs and symptoms of risk, and they can carry VA's message and help us in a coordinated fashion, I think that adds to it. But it's a difficult phenomenon that we have to continue to work on in rural America.
Okay. Well, I'm always willing to work with you guys on that, representing a very large rural district. And we know that access to healthcare is very hard to come by, especially for our veterans in those communities. So any initiatives that you'd like to partner on, I'm always willing to work on that. Just one last question. I know in your testimony it says that the VA's mental health hiring initiative is active and is addressing current hiring plans. What is the timeline? I know that also you had said that the Suicide Prevention Coordinator Program Guidebook and Suicide Prevention Program Directive are currently in development. What is the timeline on those initiatives?
Yes, for the mental health hiring initiative, we had a goal of June 2019 to hire over 1,000 mental health providers, and we've exceeded that goal. I believe it's at 1,065. We do still have some shortcomings in the area of suicide prevention. We did coordinators. I'm sorry.
Yep.
We did an analysis of that job bucket, and we determined that we needed an additional 386, of which we've hired a good number. We have 244 remaining of that analysis in order to get even with that, with the board, with that community. So June 19, to answer your specific question on the date. I do not have the timeline for the directive and the suicide prevention guidebook, which will really be the force function for working with the suicide prevention coordinators on how to do their day-to-day jobs and an increased layer of accountability, if you will, from the VACO office and the local SPC. But I committed to one of the Congresswomen earlier this morning that I would bring those dates, and as soon as I get back to the office, I'll pull it. I just hesitate to give one that might be off.
Absolutely. If you could share that with us down the road, we'd
Will do.
certainly appreciate that.
Yes.
I would yield back my time.